Sometimes people compare it as well to like children playing sports. And I'm like, if a
What child
child
is being forced to run around a track at 40 miles an hour?
literally, and if they were, and if they fell and died, it would make the news. And this happens every 3 days. I always have to start as a child because that's, I think, where everyone is taught to care for, love, respect animals. And for me, I grew up in rural Norfolk, backed onto a farm, and I used to bottle feed their baby lambs. I used to go to the zoo. I used to watch David Attenborough, Steve Irwin.
That's Norb Gordon. You may have seen him on TV recently in the run-up to the bans on greyhound racing in Wales and Scotland. Norb is a dog lover and campaigner who has made it his mission to end greyhound racing in England as well. So he's a busy man, organising local campaign groups, analysing data to hold the Greyhound Board of Great Britain to account, and drumming up excitement for a big greyhound walk on the last weekend of July in London. Let's hear now from Norb, and I began by asking him to tell us more about his two main projects, Shutdown Campaigns and Greyhound Watch.
I'll tackle shutdown campaigns first. So we set this up with the hope of supporting local people to shut down England's few remaining dog tracks. So when we started, there were 18 or 19 dog tracks left in England. Some of them were already due to close, like Birmingham Perry Bar closed in the week we started. Swindon closed just after Christmas. And then this year we've seen Oxford close. Suffolk Downs also closed. It was meant to reopen in May. We're now at the end of May. It's not reopened. So we're currently in a situation where there's only 15 active dog tracks left, and we've got a campaign against every single one. Um, and so we're supporting volunteer teams to do that. There was a handful of campaigns that already existed, and where there wasn't one, we helped set them up. But we also linked those existing campaigns with the new ones. So whilst people are working on their own at a local level, we're working collaboratively nationally. And I suppose Greyhound Watch is one of our national collaborations. So we have a team of volunteers across all of the campaigns doing two things. One, monitoring every single race. And so they're watching these races, and there are hundreds every week. They're watching every single race to see if a dog falls or suffers another
Mhm.
kind of injury or incident. And we're logging that. And so far, we've witnessed over 600 falls this year. So is an average about 4 or 5 a day, which is wild. We've only had 1 day this year where there were no incidents at any of the tracks.
Were there actually
Um,
any races on that day, or was it a closed day?
believe it or not, there were, yeah. Not many. It was a Sunday, which is their smallest race day, and, yeah, we just that was
Mm.
the only time, and it was just such a unique experience because 'cause we're so used to seeing multiple a day, sometimes more than one at the same track.
Yeah.
So that's one thing they're doing, and the second thing is, we know about 6,000 greyhounds leave the industry each year, and what happens to them is kind of just published in some very vague statistics by the industry, like a year and a half later. And so we're trying to drill into those statistics and work out, one, are those statistics accurate? And two, where are these dogs ending up? Because half of them end up in rescue centres and can be easily tracked from there, but the other half are being, retained in the same kennels they lived their whole lives, rehomed privately, sent abroad, used for breeding, or even we know 6% of them are killed. So
Mm.
we're trying to paint this picture um, of the industry, how it actually is, not how they want to be seen.
You said earlier that you worked at the RSPCA. When you see these videos, what goes on with you? I mean, I imagine watching these things once is hard for all of us, but you've spent months now uh, analyzing these fall incidents. How are you doing with all this?
Yeah, I mean, it's challenging. I'm quite emotionally resilient in terms of, I feel I have a lot of capacity to take it on.
Mhm.
But it's challenging the amount of work, just the sheer number of races to process. And we have such a great volunteer team contributing genuinely like hours of work each week, um, that really takes the pressure off a little bit. But it'll never not be hard to watch a race, and you don't know at the beginning of the race what's going to happen to the dogs. And even after you see them fall, you don't know what happens next. You can assume they'll see a vet, and then you can hope that they'll show up on an adoption site, or in a really perverse way, I suppose, sometimes the next time you see them will be on another racetrack and you'll know, okay, it can't have
Yeah,
been
they're
critical. Sometimes they don't show up for 3 or 4 months and, you know, was probably quite a serious injury, but we
mhm,
also know some of them are dead, and that's something we're doing through Greyhound Watch as well. There's a tip-off line on there where people have been getting in touch to say, you know, "This happened to this dog," and sometimes it happens off camera as well, so you wouldn't know. We saw a recent incident at Romford, which we posted on our social media, and it was horrible to watch that one. It wasn't a dog falling, it was a dog winning a race and then collapsing and kind of just writhing. And it looked a bit like a seizure. It could have been a heart attack. There's no way to know. And the industry obviously wouldn't say anything about it. But we know that happens to dogs. And this time it just happened to be on camera. But we know
mhm,
at least one other dog this year has been killed when that happened off camera. And
mhm.
we only know that because of people coming to Greyhound Watch and tipping us off, which is the right thing to do. You know, even if you're in the industry, um, if you are in the industry and you claim to care for these dogs, then a basic level of transparency about what happens to these dogs should be standard, really.
I understand you're using AI now to analyze all these videos. Is that correct?
No, not to analyze the videos. So we are doing it as purely 100% volunteer
Okay,
contributions.
sorry.
No, you're absolutely fine. So yeah, AI just isn't. What's the word? It's not advanced enough to be able to
Okay.
identify what we need, especially because sometimes the falls happen so quickly. We sometimes could easily miss them as well. So there's room for human error, and that's why we say at least X number of falls. And another reason we're saying at least, well, it's 600 at the moment, so at least 600 falls, is because the industry themselves try to hide this behind, basically the races are recorded live and they can choose not to post the replay on the betting sites afterwards and on the streaming sites afterwards. So you'll often go to a site and there'll just be a race missing, and you'll see from the race card it went ahead. And sometimes in that race card, it will say what happened. It will say a dog fell, or a dog was brought down or knocked over. But sometimes it's hidden behind a euphemism and it will say something like, this dog was checked badly. And because we can't always see the video, we don't know if that means, you know, they just got bumped a little bit or if they got
Mhm,
knocked over significantly. And the fact that they're hiding these recordings to me suggests it's probably serious. But they let some through as well. So it's not like it's a foolproof system they've got going. I would say of all of the replays they hide, 80% of them we verified have incidents, whether that's we found the recording or it's written down on the race card. But that means about 20% we're not sure or they look fine.
mhm. Do you ever go to the races, or do you have people at the races recording or kind of trying to be a witness to what's happening?
Yeah, we don't because we don't like to contribute financially to the industry.
That's fair
And
enough, yeah.
on the busier race days, they do charge entrance fees. There are days during the week when it's mostly for the online audience that they don't charge. And so we have gone in and we've seen, and sometimes recorded, you know, these incidents live. We've seen instances of, and this for me is where there's another layer of social harm here. For me, it's about the dogs, but equally, these are essentially gambling institutions that children are allowed into, and we see a lot of examples in person and even sometimes on the live stream of children being encouraged or participating in the betting process. Usually, like, you know, their parents will be bring them up to the betting stand and be like, oh, which dog do you want to bet on? The parents will do the transaction. But even that's illegal and it shouldn't be happening. And so, and they're also obviously being forced to witness these dogs going through extreme harm in the cases of falls, but even just this
Mhm.
basic level of exploitation that shouldn't be normalized. and shouldn't be encouraged.
Yeah, it reminds me of I did a magazine piece a while back on dogfighting in the US, and they were also saying that all the stereotypes are falling by the wayside. It's not just one social class, it's not just guys or whatever,
Mm,
it's entire families going and watching these absolutely horrific dogfights, and the kids are standing there sort of ringside. It's just disgusting, I think. You just really
yeah.
wonder what goes through their heads. It's unbelievable. But let's stick to the facts. Very important.
Yes.
Because it is now the end of May that we're recording this, and you have really spent this year, as we said, analyzing all these videos. What have you found in comparison also to what GBGB has been reporting in the past?
Yeah. So we're still in the early stages of reporting. The Greyhound Board of Great Britain don't publish full data; they just publish vague injury data. Um, and the last data available is from 2024, and they recorded something like 3,809 injuries. Um, so that's not necessarily that many dogs impacted because one single dog could have more than one injury.
Hmm.
And they like to hide behind that statistic by saying most of those are minor injuries. But the falls themselves, we've recorded well over 600 now, and we're keeping almost like a daily running tally that people can see on greyhoundwatch.co.uk. And what we are recording that GBGB do publish is the dogs racing the industry. And at least so far, our findings are relatively consistent with what they're publishing,
Hmm.
which is a good sign. But what we're not really doing this to challenge their statistics so much as to um, push for greater transparency. So stop hiding these replays. Tell us the names of the dogs who are injured. Tell us the names of the dogs who are killed, so that we know which is the most dangerous track. Is there a kennels that is particularly harmful to these dogs? Are there any patterns that might suggest, one particular trainer or one particular track is doing something wrong? And this is all data the Greyhound board have themselves. So they have this data, but it's something they're not willing to publish. But the regulatory body of other countries do. So, for example, in Australia, you'll often see for a lot of their tracks, the day a race happens, injury data will be published straight away. So you'll know if a dog fell, if they broke their back, broke their leg, got up and brushed it off, and they were absolutely fine, or in some cases, if they were killed. And I think for me, that's a basic level of transparency that should be expected of any industry, and it's one they're getting away with. So, in terms of like getting into the data, I mentioned around 6,000 dogs leave the industry. So we're coming up to the end of May now, and we've estimated just over 2,000 dogs have left the industry. So those stats are consistent. And of those dogs, most of them are published on the Greyhound Watch website. And through that website, we take down a dog when they show up, either rehomed, up for adoption, or if a trainer gets in touch and says, this dog's been rehomed privately, or this dog's in my kennels right now, or this dog's, injured and on rest, because we've had a few of those. And so of those roughly 2,400 dogs we've identified as having leaving the industry, obviously some of them will probably race again at some point because it is just an estimate. But we've identified where 1,300 of them are, which isn't insignificant. So we've got
Yeah.
1,100 unaccounted for essentially, which does match up with the statistics in terms of if we expect half to be accounted for in rescue centres, and then the other half made up of like returning to the trainer, rehomed privately, given away for breeding, or even killed, that the figures right now are adding up. And it was always going to be a case of we publish the website, and the first step is finding the easy dogs, which are reported almost immediately. And the hard part comes now where we've got a smaller number of dogs who just aren't publicly traceable. Because if they're not on a rehoming site and the trainers aren't saying what's happening to them, there's no physical way of knowing. And if you look at Greyhound Board of Great Britain data, in 2024, as I said, the latest available data, 1,600 or so greyhounds were retained by trainers and this figure goes up each year. And the reason for that is because there's not the homes available for greyhounds, because we have a rehoming crisis for all kinds of dogs, whether it's, you know, ones that were previously pets, one's coming from breeders, one's coming maybe from convictions from the RSPCA, even, you know, coming from Romania or Turkey or wherever. Um, and then the industry are putting 3,000 or more greyhounds on top of that into rehoming centres. So it's a breaking point. And so we're seeing an increasing number of greyhounds just being kept by trainers. And the industry would like you to believe that these dogs are, you know, going home to a comfy sofa with the trainer they spent the first few years of their lives. But that's simply not true, because there's an asterisk next to that 1,600 figure. And the asterisk says 299 of those dogs went home as pets. And so that means we know 1,300 and a handful are sitting in the same kennels that they spent their whole lives. And whereas before they'd have spent, you know, days on days in these kennels, and their only break would have been going out for training or to the track to be
Mm,
raced. Now they're not even getting that, because there's no need to train them. There's no need to exercise them. They're not profitable. They're not going to the races. So they were previously confined in very barren kennels with at least a small amount of respite, and now they're not even getting that. Um,
yeah.
and it's simply because there's nowhere else for them to go.
So they just
And
vegetate in their boxes, as it were. Is
yeah,
that right?
and
Yeah.
having worked in kennels, having worked at the RSPCA, kennels are an inappropriate place for any animal, and they're certainly an inappropriate place for an animal long term. You know, in cases like rescue centres, it's a necessary short term evil, so to speak, where at the end of it, they will at least get a happy home. For these dogs, like, you know, we don't know what happens to them.
Do the trainers or in general the industry, do they work with you or are they completely stonewalling you?
Um, so we had some trainers report through the Greyhound Watch website, which is perfect, and that's what we're asking for. Trainers who, you know, care about their reputation and care about their dogs should report them, and report to us what happens to them, because they're reporting it anyway to the Greyhound board. It's just it's not publicly available. So, and many of them have, which is really positive. But what we're noticing is those who don't, it tends to be because they can't account for the dogs and they don't want to.
Mhm.
So we had one trainer who immediately after we published the website was like, "How dare they do this? 33 of my dogs are on this website, but 31 of them are in kennels with me right now." So they were basically saying, like, you know, we got it dramatically wrong. But we didn't, because what about those other 2 dogs? And when you look at that, I mentioned before 6% of dogs leaving the industry are killed. 2 of 33 is 6%. So that means this trainer is to the to the
Yeah.
percentage exactly what you'd expect. And, you know, they're unwilling to report which of those dogs it is. 2 out of those 33 dogs had been identified by our volunteers in their races as having suffered an injury. So I think it's a
Yeah.
very fair guess that we know now what actually happened to those 2 dogs, which
Mhm.
is heartbreaking and ultimately unverifiable, because the industry and those trainers, they won't admit the truth. Um, but we're doing our best to get to the bottom of it.
Mm. I noticed in general from the way that you're talking about these dogs and also from Greyhound Watch is that it feels almost for the first time like somebody's giving these dogs a name.
Mm,
Because in horse racing, obviously, you know, we know the names. So if you're following it, you know the names, and they always have these really strange, pompous names. I'm not
yeah,
sure about dogs. The only greyhound that I actually know, I think, is the one from The Simpsons, Santa's Little Helper. But he had a
nice,
happy
yeah,
end, didn't he?
yeah.
And I think it's so important what you're doing is that you're giving the dogs actually a name. And
Mm.
I'm wondering if that in itself sort of helps raise awareness. Do you think that that sort of plays into it a little bit?
Absolutely, and it's 100% of the reason we're doing this, because these dogs are individuals. They're not just a number. Um, but unfortunately, it's how the industry lumped them together. when they publish the statistics. It's like, you know, in 2024, 123 dogs died at UK dog tracks. I don't know any of their names. And the chances are maybe one or two of their names might have been published as like, a little footnote in the racing post if they died as part of a big race. But for the most part, these dogs are forgotten. And so this isn't about anything other than giving them the dignity of being remembered. And I think that is really important. And obviously, it has the additional benefit of reminding people that these aren't just objects. These are living, breathing dogs, very similar to the dogs that you might have at home, potentially identical to the dogs you have at home if you rescued someone from the racing industry. And I think that's really important because exactly like the horse racing industry, they do give them ridiculous names. They use this euphemistic language that I mentioned before, like checked badly, but they use it to refer to the dogs as well. And I've seen them refer to dogs as like breaking down as if they're a Formula One car,
Yeah.
but they're not. They've just broken a leg. That's what's actually
Yes.
happened. And it's also not something that the passive language they use implies it's just something that happens, like it could be an accident that they'd have in the field or in a park, but it's not. It's something that's happening to them when they're put into a race where there is a reasonable l- and high risk that they
Yeah.
will be hurt at the very least and potentially killed
Yeah,
because
and it's, yeah, knowing
123
harm, isn't it? It's not the
exactly,
accident where they ran into the road or something like that. It was
which would
intentional
be
almost.
yeah, which would be equally heartbreaking. But yeah, it's obviously it's completely different. And sometimes people compare it as well to like children playing sports. And I'm like, if a
What child is
child
being forced to run around a track at 40 miles an hour?
literally, and if they were, and if they fell and died, it would make the news. And this happens every 3 days on average to a dog on a track in just England and Wales. Um, not for much longer because it's going to be banned
Yeah.
in Wales, which is another story.
Well, I was going to come on to this story now because
Yeah.
the reason why your campaign is really gaining momentum now is because we've had the bans in Wales and in Scotland, and now the big story is to ban greyhound racing in England. What are your thoughts on that? What is your feeling about how quickly that can be achieved? Because it will happen, right?
Oh,
Right?
it absolutely will happen. There's no question in my mind. I've got two stories about this that I'd like to share. The first is when I started this campaign, I had no hopes for a ban in England, and so the intention was support local campaigners to shut down their tracks through sustained pressure and just chipping away at their finances, targeting their sponsors, their partners. But since the bans in Scotland, the ban in Wales, and I think also the surge in the Green Party, I am now much more optimistic about a ban. And so I think we could see one within the next 6 years. I'm very confident about that, potentially even under ambitious with a 6 year timeline. And I was actually speaking to a trainer at Sunderland Dog Track who came out whilst we were doing a protest to speak to us. And I wasn't particularly interested. Like, I don't expect to convince these trainers that what they're doing is cruel because they genuinely believe they care for these dogs and they genuinely believe what they're doing is, providing something for the dogs. And we just disagree. And that's fine. We're never going to agree. So I tried to shut it down early and be like, look, you think you care for the dogs. How you care for them is different to how I would. And that's fine.
Yeah.
But during the course of the conversation, towards the end, I was like, look, we're going around in circles here, but you must understand tracks are closing one by one. There are bans coming in. This was before the bans in Wales and Scotland, but we knew they were on the way. You're not going to be doing this forever. Surely, this track's going to close. And he was like, yeah, sure, maybe in like 5 years. And I don't know. If I could
Nice.
have shook his hand right there and said, 5 years, you've got a deal, I think I would have taken that deal because we'd love for it to shut tomorrow, but realistically, there's always going to be a phase down. And at the moment, the Labour government are unwilling to ban it. We're doing our best to show them, despite what they believe, it's not a well regulated industry. Actually, it's a self regulated industry that's hiding a significant amount of harm from the public in these vague statistics, in their missing race replays, in their euphemisms. And actually, they're just getting away with it because most people don't know it happens. And so part of what we're doing is shining a light and being like, Oh yeah, that dog track you thought closed 2 decades ago, actually, miraculously, it's still going, and this is how you can stop it.
What is it with Labour? Or not Labour at large, but Lisa Nandy. She stood up last year in Parliament and it was still enjoyed by millions of people, which demonstrably is nonsense. And also,
Yeah.
there was a great economic contributor. I think I've worked out that through betting income, I think it's about 50 million in tax receipts a year. I mean, that's hardly an industry worth supporting, is it? So I'm not sure what. Do you have any insight into what's going on at her department?
Not so much insight. It's hard to know because in some ways, Labour are doing some great things for animals and progressing things, and I'm really hopeful for a fox hunting ban, for example.
Yes.
But their implementation of these things and the introduction of things has been very inconsistent. I would say, if I were in government, banning greyhound racing would be one of the first things I'd be looking at as something that belongs in the past. It's been going 100 years now in England. It just is archaic. Like we're a country of people who love dogs and they're being harmed day in and day out on racetracks for a gambling industry, which in itself is also contributing to any number of social ills. So, yeah, I don't understand why they are wedded to keeping it unless they're worried. Um, I could speculate, they could be worried that if they ban dog racing, there'll be more pressure on horse racing. But at the same time, I think the longer dog racing continues, the worse horse racing looks in comparison because more horses die than dogs, and they're harder to hide, which is why there's more publicity around their names and when it happens at big events like the Grand National. Maybe it's lobbyists as well. We do
Yeah.
know the greyhound industry itself has strong ties to, for example, the police, and they've been quite influential in the past with police and courts. We saw people in 2023 who tried to disrupt the biggest greyhound race. One judge gave them £15,000 compensation orders, which is like unheard of.
Ridiculous,
And
yes.
and they were overturned at appeal, but it was clearly there were strings pulled there because that never happened.
Do you have any direct contact with the government, or are you just looking forward to having your data influence things organically?
Yeah, well, we're hoping Greyhound Watch will be a resource for MPs, but also for the local groups on the. So yes, but no, we're not speaking to anyone directly. Short of we're emailing MPs. We sometimes have a back and forth with MPs on things, and actually, a lot of MPs are quite supportive, and we've got some Labour, Greens, Lib Dems. I don't know if we've had any positive contact with the Conservatives yet, and I'm conscious Reform are quite pro, but the government's current position is it's well regulated, and so our job is to show you actually it's not regulated at all, really. And I don't know how many staff they have at the GBGB, and I don't know what they spend every day doing because beyond posting on social media and publishing stats once a year, and also incredibly late 2025 stats. We're coming into June. We don't have the stats from last year, and they have them. So why are they sitting on them? That it just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't. So if people want to get involved, what's the way in?
Yeah, we have campaigns against every single track. Some of them are one campaign targeting multiple tracks. So, for example, in the Northeast, within 30 minutes of Newcastle, there's 3 tracks, which is wild. So we have one
Ridiculous.
Northeast campaign who do
Yeah.
a campaign against all 3 tracks simultaneously. But yeah, if you find us on social media, shutdown.campaigns, or go to our website, shutdown.org.uk. You'll find a sign up form where you can fill in your name, email, phone number, and we'll get in touch and I can link you up with your local campaign. But equally, if you're not near a track, which because there aren't many left, that's a significant part of England, um, you can still sign up and support us virtually. Doing the race monitoring, for example, is one of the ways you can help. And we have a team of over 40 volunteers now doing that, which is incredible. And just such a weight off any one person's shoulders if we're distributing it. But equally, we'd love people to come down to London for the 25th of July this year, which is the day after the 100-year anniversary of Greyhound racing. It's a Saturday, and we're meeting at 11:30 near St Paul's Cathedral for a march to end dog racing and to mark this century of suffering of greyhounds. And so this is a really politically powerful moment for us to all gather march on Parliament and demand an end to the racing of dogs. And so if you're not near a track, either get involved virtually or book your tickets down to London for this march, because we're expecting to have some incredible speakers. We're expecting it to be hugely impactful and just a show of strength on this 100 years where the industry is trying to celebrate and just being kicked and kicked and kicked, whether it's bans in Scotland and Wales or the publishing of data that they don't want people to see. They're really struggling to mark what should be a huge milestone for them, but is actually, feels a bit like a nail in the coffin.
Feels like the end, yeah. When we go out sometimes, or when we meet people who are not in our bubble of animal welfare campaigners like you, or people who report on it like me, there are some quite archaic arguments coming at us. You earlier mentioned people don't even think that greyhound racing really still exists. What is your dog park speech, as it were? What's the main argument that you feel is the most effective in this context?
I mean, the misconceptions are for people who do know about the industry that dogs love to race and maybe even that it's good for them. And we had a protest at Newcastle the other week, and someone said that on their way in, and I said back, I was like, dogs die at this track, and he was like, oh no, I didn't know that, and like just immediately he was like, I don't agree with that. For me, it all comes back to the fact that dogs love to run and they deserve the freedom to choose when and how and with whom they run. So if it's at a park, if it's in their garden, if it's with other greyhounds, if it's with other dog friends, they should have the right to choose that. And they should be encouraged and supported to do that in an environment where it's safe, not on a track where they're forced to run at incredibly fast speeds around incredibly tight turns, bunched up, and where we know they, they when they fall, it's not like they're tripping; they're like cartwheeling over themselves. I've walked so many dogs through my job and through just fostering and adopting, and I've never seen a dog injure themselves quite as catastrophically as I see every single day on a dog track. And so I think if you're in a park, differentiating between a slight stumble that might happen to any dog and what we see daily on these tracks is like really, really crucial. And if anyone watches, I'm like, just watch closely and you won't be watching for long until you see something that the commentator might describe as a tumble, but you're like, that was more than a tumble.
That's not a puppy tumble, no.
Yeah.
No, the last question that I always like to ask is very important. Do you have a dog at the moment?
No, I don't. My
What is
partner,
on the cards?
yeah. So my partner and I are moving in together and she really wants to get a greyhound. So it's happening.
That's so exciting.
Um, yeah, it won't happen before August because from the 1st of August, I'm going to be walking from Newcastle Dog Track all the way down to Brighton Dog Track and stopping every dog track on the way. So we can't get a dog before that, but it's going to take me all month, and that's happening, and that's going to be to raise awareness for the fact greyhound racing still happens,
Could
and
could
my
you adopt
reward afterwards.
could you adopt one on every track as you walk down?
That would be amazing. Yeah, 15 by the time I get to Brighton. I think walking them in the August heat, I'm worried for my own welfare. I think I would,
Yes, that's fair enough.
yeah. But yeah, I think the reward and the rest after that will be finding a greyhound of our own and giving them the life they deserve and the sofa and the cuddles and freeing them from a kennel. Yeah.
That sounds amazing. Um, I know this is a horrific topic, but whenever I speak to people like you, I'm always hugely optimistic that change is possible and change is necessary. And I thank you so much for all your incredible work that you're putting into this. I know you're doing this on a voluntary basis, but it really seems a full-time job and such an important job that you do. So thank you so
Yeah.
much.
It feels like full time and the rest, but
And
no,
the rest.
you know what? I always say I wouldn't change it except if I didn't need to do it because it was banned.
Yes.
So yeah, no, thank you for having me on to speak. I really appreciate it.
Cool. I look forward to seeing your first of 15 adopted dogs soon.
Can't wait.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
There's been a lot of information in this episode, and you can find it all in one place on Wonderdog's Substack, which is wonderdog.substack.com. And don't forget to book your tickets to come to London for the 25th of July, with or without Greyhound. The more the merrier. So much for this episode. In the next one, I'm joined by Shannon Keith of Beagle Freedom Project. She was involved in the major victory to free hundreds of beagles from the notorious Ridgeland farm in the US. You've seen it in the news. Now we go behind the news with Shannon. So definitely tune into the next episode. And to make sure you never miss an episode or a post or a note, please head to our new Substack, which is wonderdog.substack.com. I keep saying it, but I really want you to sign up to it. Signing up or subscribing is free. But if you want to support my work, which I would hugely appreciate, you can sign up for £8 a month. And for that, you get access to our chat community and also access to the occasional exclusive Zoom call. That's it for this episode. Pardon the dogs from me. Goodbye.